Thanks for joining us today. We're really excited to have John Cotter here to present on colorblind design. John is fairly new to our team. He's been here a few months now. He comes from a federal background and he worked in accessibility. He's an accessibility expert. He worked at Social Security Administration, and we're really happy to have him here on our team. John, take it away.
Okay, thanks everyone. Welcome everybody. So let me start off with a question, and let me know if you're not seeing the slide. What do you put on your fries? I usually go with ketchup, but the right half of this image looks like it might be chocolate sauce. So this is what ketchup on fries looks like to a person with protanopia, and that's a form of color blindness. And so today, that's what we're going to be talking about, how people see color differently and how that should influence our design. I'm John Cotter. I'm a digital experience and accessibility specialist with NCDIT. And like Amy said, I'm new to state government, coming from federal government. I'm very happy to be a member of this accessibility community of practice group. And today, yeah, we're talking about use of color. And it's a very visual presentation. So I'm going to try my best to describe the visuals for those of you who can't see. Okay, so let's get into it. So the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines, WCAG, it says color can't be the only way to communicate information. And that's because not everyone sees colors or sees color the same way. Worldwide, about 300 million people have some color vision deficiency, and it's about 1 in 12 males, 8%, it's pretty high, and 1 in 200 females. And for some reason, it's higher in males, something to do with genetics. So if there's at least 12 males here today, chances are one of you has a form of color blindness. And if that's you, feel free to share in the chat, or maybe you know somebody else with color blindness. Being colorblind, it doesn't necessarily mean that you see in black and white. Most people see some color, and seeing only gray is extremely rare. It's like 1 in 33,000. So yeah, most people see some color, and some people, like you may have heard of red-green color blindness. So that's actually like the most common form of color blindness. Some people call it red-green color blindness. And in a minute, you're going to learn all the medical terms for this, but let's do a quick test. So if you take a look at these two images here, if you can't see the 6 on the left or the 5 on the right, then you probably have a red-green color vision deficiency. And if this is you, you might find it hard to distinguish any colors that have red or green hues in them. For example, you might mix up the blue and purple. Like if you have a red-green color blindness, you might not be able to tell that this rock star guy here on the left has purple hair. You might see him more like the image on the right, and that hair looks kind of bluish to me. I do not have color blindness. So here's all the medical terms for all these different types of color blindness, and this is their breakdown with percentages. So most people with color blindness have deuteranomaly, and so that's about 2.7% of people. And if you look where the color, let me get my laser pointer. If you look where the color band is for purple in deuteranomaly, you can see it's kind of missing in a way. It's like a lot of purple is absent there in that band. And then if you look at the green, it's very muted compared to full color vision. So that's kind of what we're talking about. Color blindness is kind of a spectrum, and it goes from mild to moderate to severe. And some people with the severe forms might think that their condition is mild. They may not know how severe their color blindness is because it's all they really ever knew. Like they never ever saw full color vision. So a lot of people are going around without knowing. And So you're going to take a look at a collection of images that have been altered with a color blindness simulator so that you can experience the world as a person with color blindness. It's football season, and here's what the big three NC college football helmets look like to people with different forms of color blindness. So if you look at the NC State helmet here, it's very red, right? And then if you had Deuteranomaly, it's a little more orangey, a little more light brown. Protanopia is looking a little green here. Tritanopia, not much change, but UNC looks a little more teal. So I think this is really interesting. And then here's some other NC sport team logos. So that red swirl of the hurricane, you can see how the red is really, really affected by these different types of color blindness, but blue, not so much. Tritanopia looks a little bit more leaning towards teal and green. Now, I'm more of an NFL guy myself, and so I could stare at this for days. This is every NFL team's helmet, and if you compare the full color against the Deuteranomaly, most of the colors are there, right? They're just kind of muted. Like if you take a look at maybe this, what is this, Taylor Swift's team here, the Chiefs, and the orange Bengals and Browns. Look down in Deuteranomaly, and it's very muted. It doesn't pop quite as much, those brighter colors. And then if my buddy Justin's here, he's a Vikings fan. I wonder if he realizes that that's a purple team, because it doesn't look so purple to someone with Deuteranomaly. And then in Deuteranopia, that's a more extreme version of that red-green color blindness. And now look how absent the red is here. The Chiefs helmet, the color looks almost the same to the Jets. So this is kind of like a classic case between, you can't tell the difference between red and green. And then the Vikings doesn't look purple at all. I wonder if any Vikings fans have Deuteranopia at some point in their life, they had to be told, hey, your team is purple. And then the Vikings, or no, the Eagles looks kind of dark gray. It doesn't look so green here. There's a lot of missing green and red with Deuteranopia. With Protanopia, it's similar, but black is even, or red is even more absent. Look at this Chiefs. Look how dark that helmet is. And the oranges kind of blend here with the green. The Tritanopia is fairly different as well. If you look at the Packers, that cheese head yellow in full color, compare that to Tritanopia, that yellow looks very similar to the gold of the 49ers and Saints. So yeah, again, I could just stare at this stuff for days. And going back to my fries example, the right side is what a ketchup bottle looks like to someone with Protanopia. Pretty wild. Oops, going the wrong way. How do you like your steak? Anybody like it rare? So if that's you, you probably don't want your chef to have Deuteranomaly, because I don't see any pink in these cuts of meat on the left. Like I took a Deuteranomaly filter and put it on this image, and that's what it looks like. So if you like your steak rare, that cut towards the top, good luck if your chef has Deuteranomaly. Maybe is this why you shouldn't do your own electrical work? Because if you have Deuteranopia, it's pretty much impossible to tell the red and green wires. Again, I applied a filter to this image, the Deuteranopia filter, and this is what it looks like. So maybe the next time your electrician shows up, you can ask them to take an Ishihara test, the test with the dots, just to make sure your house doesn't burn down. Dogs have something similar to Deuteranopia. Here's a dog owner tip for you. If you can download a color blindness simulator app on your phone, and with that app, you can use your phone's camera to simulate, to look through it as if you had different forms of color blindness. And if you switch on the Deuteranopia mode, go to the dog toy aisle and look at all the toys. Look at this image here. You can kind of see how what is your dog going to get excited about? And I have a little image in the lower left here of a blue ball in some green grass, and that really stands out. But if you imagine like a tennis ball in that grass. I wonder, they may have to use some different senses to try to find that ball. It's going to kind of disappear in the grass. And this is another interesting thing about colorblindness. Smithsonian Magazine wrote an article about Vincent van Gogh possibly being colorblind. Some people think he may have had protanomaly. And on the right here is the Starry Night painting with a protanomaly filter applied. And when you compare that to the full color, the protanomaly, it's like missing a lot of the greens, right? A lot of those green hues disappear with this filter, and it's just kind of a very intense contrast of colors. But what really sells it to me is this Van Gogh self-portrait, where the protanomaly, with the protanomaly filter applied, the colors kind of look more natural to me than the full color. The full color has a lot of greens and teals, and I mean, it's really pretty and artistic. The protanomaly filter just kind of looks more real. And not to downgrade his brilliance or anything, but I just think maybe there's something there. It's just kind of interesting. So now we're going to play a little game, and I have 12 colored pencils here on the screen, and I applied a protanopia filter to this image. So imagine you're in elementary school and you have protanopia. This is how you see your set of pencils. And the teacher tells you, okay, class, grab your red colored pencil. Which pencil do you pick? Which pencil is the red pencil? Go ahead and try that. It's hard, but put your number in the chat. And it looks like we're seeing kind of all over the place. 8, 7, 8, 9, 1, 12, 6, 7, 6. Okay, so I'll tell you the answer here. The answer is none. Somebody said none. The answer is 8. Good job if you said 8. Let's try it one more time. That was protanopia. Yeah. Let's try it with deuteranopia. So different type of color vision deficiency. Which pencil here do you think could be the red pencil? Put your number in the chat. 6, 3, 5, 10, 9. We're all over the place again. 1, 12, 9, 5, 9. Okay, the answer is 5. So now you fully understand how difficult it would be to be successful in a task that relies on being able to distinguish color, right? It's just impossible. Look at those numbers that you guys put. They're just all over the place. So when we use designs, when our designs use color as the only visual indicator, it's just impossible for some people to accomplish that task, right? And let's talk about a real world design that uses color for meaning. Traffic lights. So a traffic light uses color to provide meaning. I think it's the most classic case, red, yellow, green, right? So why is that okay? Why we got red and green? Like, why is that okay? Like, how is that not causing accidents? Can anybody think of maybe why that's, yeah, oh, we got a couple people, the position, the placement, the order. That's right. So a traffic light doesn't only use color to provide meaning, it also uses the position of the lit bulb, right? So if I was colorblind, if I couldn't distinguish between red and green, at least I could know, oh, the top light is lit, and I know what that means, right? So if a traffic light looked like this, just one bulb, and it just changed color, that's not accessible. That's going to cause some accidents. And now here's another fail. Maybe this is like an Australian traffic light or something. Actually, I don't know if it actually is, but the red light is lit on the bottom, and that just totally breaks our cultural norm here in the States. And just for fun, here's a koala climbing up the pole to prove that it is a traffic light. And yeah, Neil posted a good old horizontal traffic light. That's another confusing one. Here's Captain Picard face palming as he's cruising the galaxy. You know, is he going to boldly stop or boldly go or abruptly stop. Good luck with that. I think I've seen these around in Washington, D.C. So let's talk about our world. Let's talk about digital design. And I have 8 common design failures to show you regarding web design, software, and digital media. Countdown number 8, status icons. This occurs a lot in software, right? So let's say you had some sort of status indicator to show when someone was available or busy or away, right? And if you're only using color for that purpose, if you can't distinguish these colors, that's a fail, right? Because you're only using color. Over here on the right side, this is how Microsoft Teams does it. So they're using color, but they also added an icon to help people distinguish. It's a very tiny icon, but the check mark means available, the dash means don't disturb, the clock means appear away. And then this one's kind of interesting, the busy, there is no icon. And that's okay because the other ones do have icons. So that's how they kind of got away with that one. Kind of interesting, but that would be accessible. Here's another status icon one. My son has some severe food allergies, and before we go try a new restaurant, like I like to look at their food allergy tables online. I got to dig it up. And the design of these things, if anybody has experienced this, they're just crazy. They're all over the place. And I mean, this is a very horrendous example. I've never actually seen this, but theoretically, if someone were to use color in an example like this, if I had allergies and I was colorblind, I would not go to your restaurant, right? Because I can't distinguish that. I would have to call up the chef and then interrupt the whole kitchen process. What a pain. So here's a little bit of a better design. It uses icons in place of those colors. And now I kind of have to figure out what those icons mean, but visually I can probably figure it out because they're all different icons. Now, if I was a screen reader user, I would need alt text on all those icons, right, to really understand it. So I think we can improve this design just by adding text. Just put some text next to the icon. And now I don't need to refer to a legend. I have a lower cognitive load. It's going to work fine for a screen reader, and I can read this really fast. So a lot of times just adding text next to images and things can solve a lot of accessibility problems. And somebody asked, if you have the text, do you need the icon? I would say no. I think the icon at this point is just kind of decorative. That's a great question. And here's one more status icon example. This is some train schedule that I found in North Carolina. And if you look at this, do you guys see a use of color problem here? Anybody notice it? So in the legend, yeah, bus icons, Jake got it. In the legend, they used icons to help, explain what the different icons mean in their table there. But they have 2 icons that are the same icon, but different colors. So they're only using color to distinguish those 2 icons. And if I couldn't tell the difference between those 2 colors, then I wouldn't be able to use this. So somehow we got to redesign those icons just a little bit, maybe put a number on them or a letter or a stripe or something, different icon maybe. Okay, now number 7, still going down our countdown here. So the next design failure is links within text blocks. So I have a block of text here and there's a link inside there. And if color is the only way to know that there's a link in there, then that's an accessibility failure. That's what WCAG says. And so the way you solve that is you can underline the links, you can bold the links, as long as your text block is not bold. Just something to visually distinguish that these things are links, right? Now, some people might say, okay, well, what if I just when I hover over a link, the pointer changes or something, or maybe I can add a tooltip or something. Well, not everybody hovers, right? What about people on mobile devices? Most people on mobile devices, they're not using styluses. They're just going to tap stuff. And so the point is if you want someone to click on your links, it should look like a link. And when it's embedded in a block of text, an underline is a great way to solve that problem. Number 6 is maps. Take a look at this map of the East Coast. And what if the meaning of the red was that everybody in the state had to evacuate and everyone in the green could just chill? So if you had Deuteranopia and you were trying to read that map, good luck. It's impossible. Like literally, I applied a Deuteranopia filter here, and that's what the colors look like. There's no way you're distinguishing where that break is. You're gonna have to ask a friend or something. Now here's a map with a little more color variety. We got yellow, blue, gray, red, but it's still not accessible because we got a legend, but it's still not accessible because we're really only using color to provide this meaning here. So a good way to solve that is add texture. So now we got color and texture. I've used polka dots and different stripes to indicate, to help people understand the differences here. So I got vertical stripe, horizontal, diagonal, and polka dots, and it supplements the colors. That's a good solution for maps. Number 5 is calendars. And this is the payroll calendar of another state. I'm not going to say which one, but hopefully nobody on the Jersey Shore is on their payroll. Oh, shoot, I let it slip. So when you look at this, your accessibility spider senses should definitely be tingling. You see that red and green, and you should be saying, "Oh, there's problems here." Here's another calendar. This is from the Southeast Carolina, and they're using color to represent these different things, and somehow their legend, they colored the text color to match the color of the background of the days, and the text is really hard to read, and it's like bad contrast, strange font. I think this is not so great. If you're curious, this is our payroll calendar, and also kind of confusing. Like I have full color vision and I can't, it's going to take me a long time to understand what I'm looking at here. I pulled this off one of our websites. So here's a good example of calendars. This is from GSA. Again, I said I'm a federal person, and this is the calendar I got to use when I was federal. So this calendar is great because they're using color and they're also using shapes to distinguish the different days or holidays or pay period ends and things like that. And what's also great about this is a lot of times people like to print their calendars and put it on their desk, right? So that they know when payday's coming. And most governments don't have color printers, or they discourage color printing. So when you're printing in black and white, this is going to work for you. You don't need color to know when payday's coming because you got the shapes there. Square for the pay period end date, the H, green H for the holiday, and so on. Number 4 is required fields. Here's a form here to collect somebody's name, full name, first, middle, last. And if you were trying to say, indicate that the first and last are required fields, if you're just using green to do that, I've highlighted the border of the text box green and the middle is gray. If you're just using color to do that, what about the people who can't see color, right? So that's why asterisks are so commonly used to indicate required fields, because an asterisk, who cares if it's a red asterisk or black or blue or pink, as long as you can see that it's an asterisk and it's there, you pretty much know it's a required field. So that's a good way to do required fields. Errors is another one. If you only use color to highlight something being in error, what about the people who can't see red, right? So here I have year. I changed the color of the label to red. I changed the border color to red, but I might not be able to know that that field is the one that is the problem, right? And so one way to solve that is text again. So above the field, I just have an error message there. And it says, you can't be born in the future. And that helps me know that something's wrong with that year field. Number 2, I think this one is very common. How many times have you in Excel highlighted a row? You highlight a row red, and that's supposed to mean something. And then you highlight a row green, and that's supposed to mean something because red is bad and green is good. Somehow we all know that. But yeah, what if for you that might be okay if this is your own Excel sheet, right? Because you're the only one using it maybe. But now let's say you pass it to a coworker or you post it online. Now, if someone has deuteranopia, this is what they see. They're not going to be able to know which are highlighted. So a great way to solve this is adding a status column. So here I've added a status column, and I've provided some text that describes the meaning of the color. So now I can read this and I can say, okay, in Goose Creek State Park, the fish stock is very low. But maybe if I want to go fishing, I should go to Jordan Lake. So a status column is a really great way to still use color, but then also provide a meaning for that color. Now let me ask you this. Yeah, now color doesn't matter, but let me ask you this. What if you use icons instead of text? Would that be accessible? If the icons had alt text, then yeah, right? Somehow you got to think of your screen reader users. As long as they're getting the same information with the screen reader, if these images have alt text, then that would do it. And the last common failure is data visualizations. This is a huge one. And if you look at these 5 visualizations here, line chart, pie chart, scatter plot, bar graph, column graph, again, spider sense is tingling. There's use of color problems all throughout here. There's no way anybody would be able to figure this out if they couldn't distinguish the colors. So here's an example of accessible data visualizations. In the upper left, there's a line chart. I've used blue, orange, green. Great for the people who can see color, but what about the people who can't? We got shapes indicating the different points in the graph. And of course, there would be some kind of legend off to the side that would tell you the color and the shape and what that means, right? Similar with the scatter plot, we're using color, but we're also using shapes. And then with this pie chart, we've got the slices kind of separated to kind of help them, each one be easy to see the size of. And then we got text labels by each slice. So that one is great. Color, again, color doesn't matter there. And then on the lower right, we got different line styles, dotted, solid, and dashed. So let's talk about your digital strategy. You need to have a multi-sensory communication strategy. And here's what I mean by that. Reinforce color meaning with some kind of alternative, right? And I'm not saying don't use color. Color makes the world beautiful. What I'm saying is you just can't provide meaning with color alone. So you got to reinforce that meaning in different ways. And so you could use text. We saw a lot of that in my examples, icons, shapes, texture, patterns, line styles, font weights, positions, layouts, animation, and motion. And so these are all great solutions for people who can see, whether they're colorblind or not, right? But for people who can't see, there's different solutions to that too. Sometimes you got to think about the people who are using screen readers. Does my icon have alt text? Does this shape communicate? Is this shape communicated somehow? There's no kind of one size fits all approach, but it's good when you think about the different kinds of users that are going to interact with your content. And here's another tip. Test your stuff in grayscale, right? If you can convert your content to grayscale and then give it to somebody and then say, can you figure this out? Then that's a really great test to see if you've described the color meaning in some other way. Like I can see this traffic light is lit on the top, so I know that means stop, whether it's in grayscale, or whether it's I can see the color or not. And here's those data visualizations I showed you earlier in grayscale. Again, if I were going to print this out, I could understand it just fine. When you're choosing colors in your designs, think about contrast. You know, to play chess, Magnus Carlsen doesn't really need color vision. He just needs to see, okay, there's a light piece and there's a dark piece. They have very wide color contrast in between themselves. And so, you know, most people who can distinguish light and dark if they're far apart, right? If those colors are far apart, one is dark and one is very light. So contrast in your designs is really helpful. And speaking of contrast, most people can distinguish blue and yellow pretty well. I showed you a lot of examples where red and green was really hard to distinguish with all the different types of color blindness, but blue and yellow is a pretty safe bet. And now that you've kind of experienced this presentation, you'll start to see that in the world. You'll start to see that in like video game design and restaurant menus and logos and things. Blue and yellow is very common. And if you look at these different color wheels and look at the blue and the yellow in each different color vision deficiency, there is a difference there. You can tell that yellow is like the lightest color on the wheel, and blue is on the dark end of the spectrum. Most people can distinguish that blue and yellow. So those are often fairly safe colors to use. And when you're comparing two colors like blue and yellow, you can measure the contrast. You can measure the contrast, and it's something called a contrast ratio. And it basically, the contrast ratio answers the question, how different are these colors? So blue and yellow, when you measure that, I'm going to give you some tools to measure that, but when you measure that, it's 8-1. And when you measure black on white, it's 21-1. That's the highest possible contrast, right? Black and white. Something like a low ratio would be something that's like orange and white or something. That contrast there is 2-1. And so now WCAG says, it has some guidelines about contrast ratios. It says that your text has to have a contrast ratio of at least 4.5-1. So that's kind of like this magic number. Like every accessibility expert has that number memorized. Some of them might even have it tattooed somewhere. I don't know. But when you change the color of your text, that text can start to become unreadable when it's placed on a background that it has a low contrast. And here's some examples of that. You may have trouble understanding what these words are, but at least you can see the letters, right? They pop out really well with good contrast. And on the right side, that's just horrible. It kind of hurts my eyes to look at. Sorry about that. Now, WCAG also says that large text can have a lower ratio. That ratio can be 3-1. The normal ratio is 4.5-1, but when the text is large, the ratio can be lower, and that's just because large text is just kind of generally easier to read in general. And it defines large text like this. It says it's 18 points or larger, or 14-point bold and larger. That's how it defines what large text is. And here's just some examples of that, what normal text looks like and what they're considering large text. So let's talk about one more thing before I give you the tools, is non-text contrast. So WCAG also says that your graphical objects and your user interface components, they also have to have good contrast so that somebody can understand what, you know, the graphical object is where it starts and stops, and that where the interactive objects are. So if you look at this pie chart on the left, you can see that the slices are separated, and that's very intentional, because this one on the right, it's kind of hard to tell where this green slice and this light blue slice starts and ends, right? And that's because that contrast is low. It's going to be below 3-1. That's the magic number for non-text. But over here, we kind of cheated because we put a little white space in between each slice. And so now all I have to do is measure the green against white, the blue against white, each color against white, right? Because that's the adjacent colors. That's what Wikaga said. You got to measure against adjacent colors, colors that touch. And you can see they also sort of cheated with this yellow slice because they put a brown border on it. That's totally fine. They probably did that because yellow against white would be too low. It wouldn't be at 3:1 or greater. So they put a little brown border. Now I'm just testing the brown against the white. So now let's talk about the tools that you can use to measure that contrast ratio. I'm just going to give you two. There's millions out there, but if you just Google the word contrast checker, it will the first hit will probably be this WebAIM website, and that's what a lot of people use. So in this website, you can enter two hex values from your colors, your foreground and your background, and then it magically does the calculation and spits out a contrast ratio. And then it can tell you if it passes or fails for the normal or large text. So that's one useful website. You can also, like if it failed, you could slide these lightness sliders around to make the color lighter or darker. You'll see the hex value change, and it'll recalculate as you slide, and then you can find a hex value that'll work, that'll meet that contrast ratio, that magic number that I talked about. So that's the WebAIM contrast checker website. And then this is a tool you can download and install. I had no problem installing it here at NC. I just had to ask for the approval through the software request system. And this tool is great. Every accessibility professional uses this. And what this allows you to do is it allows you to pluck colors off the screen. So with WebAIM contrast checker, you kind of have to know what those hex values are. And sometimes like you have to like dig to find those values. But with this tool, you can just pluck them off the screen. So you select the eyedropper, it gives you this little zoom in thing, and you can pick a pixel. And so you can pick if you're testing text contrast, you pick a color from the text, and then you use the other eyedropper to pick a color from the background. It'll do the calculation, tell you if you pass or fail. So those are two great tools. Amy, can you put the contrast analyzer link in the chat for folks, please?
Yeah, I'll find it.
Okay, great. And the other one, you can just Google contrast checker and find it. Then this third tool this is a cool one. So if you do web design work, this is a color vision simulator browser extension. And this is what I use to generate all those images that I showed you earlier with all those filters on them that simulated the different types of color blindness. So this is called Colorblindly. I like this one. It's a Chrome extension. And when you activate the extension, you can just choose different modes of color blindness and see what it's like if you were to have one of these color blindness deficiencies, deuteranopia or protanopia. And you'll see it's pretty cool. It just flips the whole color of the page. And then you can set it back to normal and flip-flop and compare. It's a great tool to just help you design and see, okay, what is this going to look like for someone who's colorblind? So that's it for this presentation. Thank you so much for considering other people in your designs, and just remember that not everybody sees color or sees it the same way. And once again, I'm John Cotter with DIT. I'm happy to answer any questions that you have now. Amy, were there questions that you saw come through in the chat that I may have missed?
I think you, excuse me, I think you addressed most of them as you were going along. And John, this has been fantastic. Thank you so much for covering this topic and the breadth of this conversation. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Anybody else want to ask questions off mute or in the chat? Thanks for all the feedback. Okay, well, speaking of questions, we have one announcement that Amy, do you want to go over the slide here?
Yeah, just in case you missed it in our team's channel, we wanted to let you know about this digital accessibility support service. John and I are running this service, and we're providing consultations, testing. We're talking about more comprehensive testing than just the automated checkers. We're doing manual checking, we're checking with screen readers. We have customized training and education, and this is open to all state agencies. So if you're interested, you can find this in ServiceNow. Just do a search for digital accessibility support and send a ticket in. And John, I think Ruth has her hand up. She may have a question.
Sure. Yeah, Ruth.
Yeah, hi. Thank you so much for this presentation. It was absolutely awesome. I was wondering, and this is a question for you, but also maybe others on the call, about how you get your state agency team members invested and excited about the idea of taking these extra steps. So I'm the research and analysis manager with adult corrections. So our team makes a lot of the visualizations nearly identical to the ones that you showed on the what not to do slides. And I come from the federal government as well in a contracting. So we're pretty familiar with kind of requirements. And I think we had much more of a culture of accessibility checklists. And I think a lot of our superiors, just given how busy we are like, that's lovely, but it can't be a first priority. And I'm wondering if you've got good kind of talking points or ideas about workflow, or just how to emphasize the importance of putting in the little extra thought and effort and coding lines to make some of these things happen.
That's a awesome question, and there's so many answers that we could give to that question. Amy, do you want to start? I mean,
I'm sorry, John, I missed the question.
Responding to chat. Okay, yeah. She just wanted to know, how can she spread awareness, right, Ruth? How can you get people excited? How can you inform people? How can you educate them, train them? That's kind of the gist of it, right, Ruth?
Yeah, and really, I think the biggest thing for me is emphasizing to my supervisor and our team of leadership that these extra steps and these design principles should be showing up. We shouldn't be editing them out. We shouldn't be saying we don't have enough time.
Exactly. Yeah, man, that is so great. I mean, that could be a whole presentation in itself. I think the first thing is knowing it's the right thing to do, and then here's how to do it. It's not that hard. That's the next step. And then emphasizing doing it early is more effective than waiting till you've already built something and then having to go fix everything. That's another way to persuade, right? To tell people that we need money first, or we need the resources to prepare. And then the final thing is well, it's the law, so we have to do it. But yeah, Ruth, I mean, I think getting the people in touch with Amy and I and this digital accessibility support service is a good first step to, talking, expressing the law, expressing the need, answering questions. It's a battle, Ruth, and if it weren't so difficult, you wouldn't be asking that question.
For sure. And I'll share the anecdote that one of my data scientists, and he's one of our most talented kind of data visualization persons, he is colorblind. And he and I have sat down and figured out how do we work together if someone telling you that they want the bar to be yellow or they want it to be a different shade of green is not helpful feedback. And it's funny how much effort he and I have put into making sure that he is still able to make visualizations for color seeing audiences when we could also be putting that same effort into making visualizations that he can also see and engage with and know that they're more accessible. So just to share that as a funny little anecdote.
Yeah, I think that when you actually come into contact with someone with a disability, it changes your perspective. And until you actually see the impact on people when they're struggling, you're kind of ignorant towards the real gravity of the problem. For me, I was a web developer. This is a quick story. I was a web developer, and I was tasked to make our site 508 compliant. I was like, oh, what is that? I don't know. So I sent it off for a test, got all these, issues, and I was like, what in the world is this? Argued a lot, fought it. And then the tester said, okay, let me come over to your desk. And he came over and he was being escorted by his assistant. And it turns out he was low vision and he had a cane. And all of a sudden I was like, oh my, this just got real. This tester actually has a disability. And so to me, it kind of clicked in that moment and I was like, okay, how can we actually make this, what can I do? How can we, let's start fixing this stuff. So yeah, I think that's interesting, Ruth, that you have someone with color blindness that you're interacting with. But yeah, get in touch with this support service, and we can help talk to the right people and help try to persuade. Okay. Any other comments, questions? Alrighty.
All right. Thank you all.
Yeah. Have a great day. Hope you bookmark those links in the chat.